Warriors are the most direct class in Guild Wars 2. They fight up close and personal, and they have no tricks up their sleeves, making them one of the easier classes to play around. However, they are master weapon wielders with access to the most weapon diversity out of all classes. They thrive in sustained fights, and that means that even though they're probably one of the easier to play around, if you don't play around them, you will get punished hard. So often playing around a warrior is done by avoiding them, kiting, or playing indirectly. The core mechanic of warriors is adrenaline and burst skills. They gain adrenaline the more enemies they hit and whenever they themselves are hit. So they love to be in constant contact with their opponents, which gives them more adrenaline, which gives them burst skills. And the more often they hit their burst skills, they'll gain a lot of sustain and damage. Avoiding these burst skills is important to fighting warriors because they are essential to their ability to thrive in fights. If they miss their burst ability, they will not gain any of the effects of their traits and will still lose the adrenaline. Their burst skills will depend on which weapon they are wielding, so I will go over these when I go over each weapon. So their heal skills are Defiant Stance, which is going to be a buff on their bar that you'll see just like this, and when you attack a warrior that has Defiant Stance up, they will heal instead of taking damage, so you just want to avoid them during that. There's also Healing Signet, which is just going to have this buff on their bar as well, and that's going to be permanent pretty much, so you just want to recognize that they have Healing Signet, and how you want to play around that is just putting as much poison as possible on them, and then otherwise just playing normally. Then there is Mending. Mending is a 1 second cast heal, and it cleanses 5 conditions, and it's a pretty low cooldown. How you want to handle Mending warriors is you want to interrupt their heal, because usually when they use Mending it's when they have a lot of conditions on them. So if you interrupt their Mending, they'll tank all of those conditions for a longer time until the 4-second interrupt cooldown comes off. But by then, they will have taken a lot more damage from those conditions. So yeah, it's really important to interrupt Mending. Most warriors will take the Discipline trait line, which gives them lower weapon swap cooldown, and it gives them Warrior Sprint, which gives them movement speed, and the ability to cleanse Immobilize when they use a leap skill, which is really important because it basically means they're immune to Immobilize, because most warriors have tons of leap skills, and you don't want to try to land a burst combo on a warrior that's immobilized because they'll just get out usually. Strength warriors have lots of might generation, which gives them sustain over time. They gain might when they hit, so kiting them and trying to get some damage off while they can't trade with you is much better than trying to trade with them and then see who does more, because they'll usually come out on top. They also have Reckless Dodge when they go into the Strength trait line, and that will give them a unblockable attack at the end of their dodge, which will also give them might. Some of the physical skills that warriors get more synergy with when they go into the Strength trait line are Bull's Charge. This is a 3-second knockdown, has an evade and a very long range leap, and it just sets up so many burst combos for warriors. So when you see the Bull's Charge animation, you really want to dodge that 100%, because the 3 seconds that you're knocked down is going to probably be enough for you to either lose all your health or enough that you're going to be needing to leave that fight. They also have Rampage. Rampage is their elite skill. They'll become basically immune to Immobilize and Cripple and all that stuff, and they will gain a lot of toughness and vitality. So power builds can't really deal with Rampages very well. However, condition builds can, because not only can warriors not really cleanse while they're in Rampage because they can't swap weapons, and they have the Discipline trait that gives them condition cleanse on swap, but they also don't have access to their utility skills, which is usually where they get their condition cleanse. So conditions are very good while warriors are in Rampage, so you want to try doing that. And Rampage is also a very strong ability because it gives them pretty much CC on 4 abilities, and then they have the Rush ability, which does a lot of damage, and then their auto attack. So you want to not stand in the auto attack of Rampage, and you want to 100% dodge the Rampage leap, or like the Rush. And because they have so many CCs, it's easy for them to land that Rush. So you don't want to be wasting your stun breaks if they're just spamming CCs on you. You want to wait until they do the Rush and then stun break and then dodge the Rush. There are also defense warriors, which you can see by the adrenal health that they'll proc on them whenever they use a burst skill. So how you want to play around defense warrior is you want to basically not get hit by their burst skills, because whenever they hit you with a burst skill, not only does it do damage, but it gives them adrenal health, which basically just gives them health over time. So you're going to be denying them damage and sustain if you just avoid their burst skills, which we will go over a little bit later. They'll also have Shield Master, which will make their shield block skill reflect projectiles instead of block. So you don't want to be hitting yourself with your own attack, so just stop attacking when they use their shield stance. They'll also have a lot of passive Endure Pain and other stances. So stances are pretty important for defense warriors, and you just want to look at the icons on their bar. So they have Endure Pain, which makes them immune to physical damage, but they can still be CC, they can still receive conditions and condition damage. So you want to just use conditions or CC during Endure Pain, and you can see that on their bar. You also want to watch out for Vallun stance, which will give them a stability pulse, and it will make them immune to critical damage. So power builds or like Berserker kind of builds, they just want to avoid warriors during Endure Pain and Balance stance because they can't crit anyway. There's also the Berserker stance, which will just pulse resistance on them and give them a lot of adrenaline. So usually during their stances, warriors are kind of like invulnerable to a certain kind of damage or effect. So you want to use the other effect. So if they're in Berserker stance, use power damage. If they're in Endure Pain and Balance stance, use conditions and CC appropriately. Then you have Tactics warriors. They just generally run shouts, and there is one shout that is really strong. It's called Shake It Off, and it is a long cooldown. When traded, it is a 60-second cooldown. When not traded, it's a 75-second cooldown, but it has 2 count recharge. So you know that if a warrior just shouts Shake It Off, or if you see like them lose a lot of conditions and they didn't use an animation, it's probably Shake It Off. And if you see them do that twice, it is also a stun break, so they might use it as a stun break. You know that they're probably out of stuff, because Shake It Off is such a very heavy defensive cooldown that helps them to survive. And if they're out of it though, because it's such a long cooldown, then you know they're vulnerable. One elite skill that you want to watch out for is the War Banner. When cast, it will revive allies for the warrior and stomp enemies. You either want to disrupt this with a like daze or something like that to prevent them from rallying their allies, or if they're trying to stomp enemies, then you can blind or Aegis your ally. So it's basically an attack, and when that attack lands, it will do the stomping or finishing effect. So if you blind them, then it misses and it can't do the finishing, or if you Aegis on your ally who's in the down state, then they'll also miss. Spellbreakers will have access to more burst skills because their burst skills only cost 10 adrenaline instead of using up all their adrenaline, and they have less maximum adrenaline as a result, which means they don't really get as strong burst skills, they just get more of them. But this also means that they get full counter, which is a very strong burst skill. And when they are traded for Discipline, it is an 8-second cooldown. And what it will do is it will give them a block effect, so the next attack that hits them will be blocked, and then they will go into an evade for like half a second, and daze all nearby enemies for 2 seconds, and proccing full counter will also recharge their weapon burst skill. What you want to do against full counter is try not to proc it because you'll give them a lot of effects. Generally you can know when they're going to use full counter because you can count to 8 after their last full counter, which you can usually feel out, and when they're about to do something in melee range, they'll usually full counter right after they've done it because they don't want to get punished for all the damage that they tried to trade with you. So they'll generally, once full counter is off cooldown, they'll go in melee range, do an attack, get some adrenaline, and then use full counter. So you want to predict this and not attack into the full counter. And especially, you don't want to put out damage that you lose control of, such as ground targeted pulsing AoEs or some kind of slow attack. You want to do quick attacks to try to bait out the full counter, and then you want to stow weapon and don't proc the full counter. And that'll prevent them from doing a lot of CC to you, and CCs on Spellbreaker can immobilize if they take no escape, which a daze plus a immobilize can equal basically a stun, because you can't move and you can't use skills. Spellbreakers also remove boons from targets that they CC, making them really strong versus high sustain classes. So you just want to avoid as many CCs as possible, but that's more into the weapon skills. Another thing to watch out for is the Mage Bane tether. Whenever they land their burst skill, if they are running this trait, so not all Spellbreakers will run it, but if they are, they can land a burst skill, and full counter also counts, and it will tether them to the target, and it will pulse might for them, reveal them, and give them increased damage to the target. And if the target moves out of range of them, it will pull the target to the warrior, and then it will end the tether. So what you want to do when the warrior is getting close to the pull range of the tether, when they get around that 600 range, you either want to move closer to them so that you don't get pulled, or if you really want to break the tether, you can use a leap skill or a dodge roll into the pull animation, so you have to predict it pretty well, and you won't get pulled as far. Or just use a stability right before you get to that range, or a stun break as soon as you know it's about to proc. Berserkers are a more aggressive variant of warriors, and they, instead of using burst abilities, they use primal burst abilities, and to do so they need to go into their burst mode, which means that they can't just use their burst skills whenever, they have to be in their berserk mode. So you'll see that they go into berserk mode when they do this, and you'll see it on their bar as well when they're in berserk, and then they can use their burst skills, and all of their burst skills will be a little bit more effective, and they'll be able to use them more often while in the berserk mode. You have to watch out for them when they're in the berserk mode, but they're also a little bit more susceptible to attack because they lose toughness while they are in berserk mode. You also want to watch out for the headbutt. If they get stunned, they can break stun with their headbutt, and the headbutt is a 3-second stun, so you can get hit for a very long time, and it gives them full adrenaline. So if you get hit by headbutt, you're probably going to eat a lot of their burst skills too if you don't have a stun break. The main weapon that most warriors will use is the greatsword. It is just an insanely useful weapon because it does a lot of damage, and it has a lot of utility. So the auto attack is probably the worst part of the greatsword. It doesn't really do much. 100 Blades is a skill that roots you in place while you deal a lot of attacks in succession, and it does a lot of damage, but it's hard to land. But also warriors have a lot of CC, so you can be in situations where the opponent is either in like the down state or just stunned, and you can land that 100 Blades. So you really want to be careful with those CCs around warriors. Next is Whirlwind Attack. This is going to basically rush them in a direction that they choose, and it will evade while doing so and deal a lot of damage. So you basically want to avoid Whirlwind Attack. Most warriors will use this off cooldown because it is such a rewarding skill. It's an evade, and damage, so it's basically better than every other skill on their bar. So they'll probably use Whirlwind Attack as soon as they go into the Greatsword, or they'll use it very shortly after swapping into it because it is such a high effort ability. And because Whirlwind Attack does more hits the longer they are on top of the target, they'll want to position it very effectively to hit all of those times. So if they're against a wall, then they'll rush into the wall and they can basically hit all times, and that can do a lot of damage. So you don't want to be standing next to a wall when a warrior is in the Greatsword, and you also just don't want to try to land something on them before they've used Whirlwind Attack, because they'll just evade and then you'll take a lot of damage still. Rush is one of their strongest mobility skills. It will move them really fast in a direction and then do an attack once they reach their target. They can use this to escape as well, and it can be interrupted, so you usually want to daze them while they're using Rush if you have some sort of ability that can do that from range. Their burst ability on the Greatsword is Arcing Slice, and that will do a wide AoE that will do more damage to targets that are below 50% HP. So it does 2000 base damage when they are around 2000 when they are below 50% HP. So when they're above, it doesn't do as much, but it also doesn't scale with adrenaline. It scales the fury that they gain with adrenaline. So this skill can be spammed out very often and do a lot of damage even if they aren't hitting someone who's below 50% HP. So you do really want to watch out for Greatsword Warriors because they just have so much damage available to them from the burst skill and their 100 Blade, Rush, and Whirlwind Attack. So yeah, it's really strong. The next most common weapon that warriors will use is actually the shield. Shield is just an insane weapon because it's an offhand, so it's only 2 skills that you're investing in, but both of those skills are so strong. Shield Bash is a 2-second stun which leaps you towards the target, and they can use Shield Bash to set up a lot of their damage, as I said, like the 100 Blades while they're stunned, and they can just basically set up combos with it. Then they have Shield Stance, which will give them a 3-second block on a 30-second cooldown. It's just really strong because it's a durational block, so all attacks that hit them during this, they will block. So you want to have a unblockable skill or some kind of interrupt that's unblockable to get them out of Shield Stance. And you know that it's a 30-second cooldown, so warrior skills are usually pretty low on cooldown because their weapon swap is also pretty low cooldown, but these shield skills, even though they're very powerful, they are on longer cooldowns. There's also the Axe, which has a very strong auto attack unlike the Greatsword, and this will be very quick, so it's good at gaining them adrenaline. And then there is the Cyclone Axe, which does a lot of damage in melee range, so it's a quick animation like this. It'll give them fury and a lot of damage, so you want to watch out for being in melee range of an Axe Warrior. Fortunately, Axe Warriors are a little bit slower than Greatsword, so you don't have to worry too much, but if they do get on top of you as an Axe Warrior, they'll do a lot more damage than a Greatsword will because they just have such quick attacks and they do so much damage. So you want to basically not stand in melee range of an Axe Warrior. But also, Axe Warriors will have Throw Axe, and Throw Axe is a very high damaging ability that can cripple from range. And even though it does a lot of damage without this effect, it does even more damage when they are below 50% HP, and even more than that when they are below 25% HP. So as you can see there, 4,000 crit, and I'm not even like trying too hard, I just use for great justice. So you do really want to be careful of the Throw Axe. So even though being in melee is very dangerous against an Axe Warrior, being ranged is somewhat difficult too. So you don't want to like move in straight lines where they can lead you on with their axe. You want to be kiting in unpredictable ways. The Axe Burst skill is Eviscerate, which will scale in higher damages the more adrenaline you have. So Greatsword basically has a better potential to do more damage, but they have to be below 50% HP. whereas Axe can deal more damage at all times. So Greatsword is more like a bursty weapon and a finishing weapon, whereas Axe is better at DPS. Also, there's the Axe Offhand, which is just a pretty much heavy DPS weapon. They'll give them quickness, and they can do this whirling axe, which does insane damage, so you don't want to be standing in range of it. The Sword Main Hand is a decent condition weapon because it has bleeding on the auto attack, but it does have pretty good power damage as well on the Savage Leap, which is a leap towards a target which will cripple, and that missed for some reason, but okay. And they have Final Thrust, which also does more damage to targets below 50% HP. So when they're above 50% HP, it does like 800 damage, not bad, but when they're below, it does double that and will do a lot of bleed. So you want to be careful around sword warriors, or really any kind of warrior, when you're below 50% HP. The sword burst skill is Flurry, which can do a decent amount of damage and immobilize the target, but in general it just roots you in place as a warrior, so they only need to use the Flurry at the start, and what they'll do is they'll flurry you, and then they'll probably from there they'll use something else while you're immobilized, because they don't need to sit there and flurry while you're immobilized. They can just get the immobilize out, and then they can go off and do another burst skill. So you want to be careful around sword warriors because they can immobilize you like that, and if they're a Spellbreaker, then they don't get the added adrenaline of the flurry. So the more adrenaline they have, the longer the immobilize, and the more burst damage they can do to you while you're immobilized, because you can't dodge. The Sword Offhand has a block, which you don't want to hit into because it'll do a massive bleeding counterattack, and the Force skill will throw the sword into them and impale them and basically give out pulsing torment. So you want to wait until the sword gets out of you and then cleanse the torment, because the torment lasts for quite a duration. Mace is a very CC oriented weapon. When in the main hand, it is very slow but gives out weakness, and it can give daze and has a counterattack that does a decent amount of damage. The Mace burst skill is a stun that does more stun for how much adrenaline they have. So level 1 stun is 1 second, but level 3 is 3 seconds. So you don't want to get hit by that 3-second stun, because even though it's a very wide animation that is pretty easy to see, it is going to set up a lot of their combos. The Mace 5 is Tremor, which will send a knockdown from range, so that can also knock you down for 3 seconds. So that's almost like a bull's charge if you think about it. The longbow is a very long range but very slow weapon. It will give out a lot of burning when in melee range, so you want to watch out for, even though it has a lot of range damage, the Fan of Fire when in melee is one of their strongest abilities, because if it's done in melee range, it's a shotgun effect, and that will give very long duration burning, and it will hit all 3 of the arrows, which will give 3 stack of burning. So if you're a condition build with Fan of Fire, this is where most of your damage actually comes from. So you want to be careful of being in melee range when they swap to their longbow. And if you see the Fan of Fire come out, then you can go back in melee range. They also have a lot of blinding on their longbow, so you do have to use quick attacks to get rid of that blinding, and it really helps them be defensive while also doing some damage with their longbow. One of the more important skills to watch out for, though, is the pin down. And pin down will do this very obvious animation where they kind of pull back, and then the arrow has this effect on it that you can clearly see, and that will be a 3-second immobilize with 6 stacks of bleeding. So yeah, avoiding pin down is one of the most important things to do. And the burst skill on longbow is Combustive Shot, which is larger for how much adrenaline they have. And you don't want to be standing in this fire field because it gives them a lot of synergy with their skills, because they can use blasts inside that and give themselves might, which will give them more sustain because might gives them damage and can sometimes give them sustain. And Combustive Shot is such a strong skill because it can actually give them all of their adrenaline proccing traits without needing to actually hit the target. all they need is for that skill to land on the ground. But if you have a projectile blocking skill, like say if you're an elementalist with swirling winds, because their combustive shot is a projectile, and if you block it or reflect it, you can basically prevent them from landing their sustain. Rifle is just a ranged single target damaging weapon. You want to watch out for the volley for the most part because that will do a lot of damage and it's like a faster shot, and the rifle butt will give them a knockback in melee range. So one of the ways to play around rifle warriors is to just get in their face, but you usually will get rifle butted as soon as you do get in range. Their burst skill in rifle is kill shot, and this will do more damage for each adrenaline level they have, and it will just do a lot of damage from range, and that's pretty much it. Most rifle warrior builds though will stack tons of modifiers to make their kill shots do more damage. So usually if a rifle warrior is using kill shot, you want to avoid that at all costs. Hammer warriors have a lot of CC, and they have a little bit of burst damage to targets that are CC'd as well. So you want to watch out for 3 different CCs on hammer warriors. So first of all, they have staggering blow. This will give them a very quick kind of like AoE around them, which will knock back. And it's not a very long CC, but it can set up their other CCs, which can be more dangerous. So there is Backbreaker, which will knock down the target for 3 seconds, and it will reset their Fierce Blow, which will do a lot of damage to CC'd foes. So playing around Hammer Warriors is often just stun breaking and avoiding the Fierce Blow. So not necessarily is being stunned going to do much damage to you, but the Fierce Blow that happens after you get stunned is an issue. And it's a 4-second cooldown, so you want to watch out for that. You also want to watch out for Earthshaker, which will stun you longer for each level of adrenaline, and it's an AoE stun with a leap, so it helps them to really engage on fights and to land their CC combo, so you really want to avoid the Earthshaker. Spellbreakers have access to a dagger main hand and a dagger offhand because they are masters of weapon wielding, so they got 2. But the dagger main hand has a very strong auto attack that will give them might, and it's just really quick, so it's kind of not characteristic of warrior skills to be that quick, and it gives them a lot of adrenaline because of that. And then the Aura Slicer is their number 2 skill, which is a leap, which does a lot of damage and will put slow on the target. And then you have Disrupting Stab, which is a 1/4 second daze if it doesn't interrupt anything, or it's a 1 second daze if it does interrupt a skill. And this is good with the trait that gives them Immobilize, because even if you don't interrupt something, you can immobilize them for 1 second, and that can set up another ability, like another CC. So it's a good CC chain enabler because it's a really quick attack. Then the offhand has Wastrel's Ruin. This does more damage to foes who are not using skills, so if they're CC'd, then they will take a lot more damage from this. And then there's also Blade Storm, which will do a projectile reflect in front of them and just do a bunch of different hits. The Dagger Burst skill, though, is an unblockable attack which will leap towards a target and remove 3 boons. So it's really strong for Spellbreaker because a lot of their CCs can be avoided by using stability. So they'll use Breaching Strike on someone who has stability, and then they'll be able to CC them. Aura Slicer and Breaching Strike basically have the same animation and cooldown, but Breaching Strike is much stronger than Aura Slicer, so you can't really tell which one is which, but you can know that Breaching Strike will be used when you have stability on you usually, and that Aura Slicer isn't unblockable. So if you see them launching at you and you're blocking, then it's most likely going to be the unblockable boon removal, and you want to stop blocking and dodge. Guardians have blinds and Aegis to trade with warriors and deal damage to them while the warriors can't really fight back. So warriors have a very big disadvantage when getting up close and personal with guardians. Necromancers can be punished heavily by the CC that warriors can put out, but getting into melee range of a necromancer as a predictable warrior can be very difficult with no tricks or ports like the other classes do. Necromancers also have many ways to corrupt the warrior's might into weakness. Mesmers are the exact opposite of warrior. They are about misdirection and avoidance, whereas warriors are about directness and persistence. This often means that the advantage is given to either situationally. If they must fight over an objective, the warrior benefits, but if there are many choices for them, the Mesmer benefits from the choice of rotation. Revenants are also very strong against warriors because the warrior can't take the sustained pressure of a Revenant for long, but the warrior can fight back with a lot of CCs and counter pressure, and Revenants are lacking in stun breaks. Engineers are susceptible to CC, so warriors can land a lot of their damage on them even if it's predictable. Rangers also don't deal with warriors well because, like engineers, they don't have any ports to disengage from a warrior who can stick to them very hard. Thieves may be able to kite very well, but they are squishy, and warriors have so much sustain and so many skills that need to be dodged that a thief has to take many risks to get the kill, which can get them killed very easily if they run out of stun breaks and the warrior lands a single CC. So while dealing with warriors is very simple, it is a very difficult task to actually get value against a warrior because they trade so much better than every other class. So what you have to do is you have to get a free trade. So when you use an attack on them and they use an attack on you, they usually win out. So you need to find situations where you can either get damage on the warrior by using either terrain or like mobility to hit them, and then don't allow them to hit you because they just gain adrenaline the more they hit you, which gives them more burst skills, which gives them more sustain and might, which gives them more of this whole like might generation engine. And in general, conditions are very strong versus warriors. Even though warriors have a lot of ways to remove conditions, warriors are also very easy to land conditions on. And blindness is a very strong condition against warriors as well, because all of their attacks are usually slow and predictable. So that means that you can blind them and get those easy trades that I was talking about. Don't get CC'd, or don't waste your dodges on one of their abilities if it isn't one of their massive CCs or big damaging attacks, and you're pretty much good to go. So if you like this kind of video, give it a like and subscribe. Check out the other matchup videos in the playlist in the description of this video, and I will see you guys next time.